In at number 10, we have got the Uteranus, and although this creature was just viewed as a creature which is going to buff all of your creatures in a boss fight, don't know why I said creature that many times in a sentence, but either way, this thing is obviously mainly used to buff creatures in a boss fight with its courage roar, but it also just works as a pretty decent carnivorous mount, and you can actually do bosses with this dinosaur, which most people probably wouldn't consider doing, and maybe it's not the best option. If you go to something like a Rex, you probably have a higher success rate, but you could definitely do it with something like the UT, and you can have a pretty decent success rate nonetheless. And actually using a UT in some cases can be a lot better than the Rex, because they're much more mobile creatures and you may just like them more, and if you breed them and you get some really good ones, they can be really good for that use. They're just general great meat harvesters and hide harvesters as well, because they can kill loads of creatures. And obviously you can use their fear roar as well, not really in boss scenarios, but you can kind of use them as a sort of turret thing, that like if someone's coming to raid your base on a Pteranodon, you can always just fear roar those things away is what I meant to say, and then from that you can essentially disable them from raiding you, which is actually a pretty decent strat if you've never tried it. Next up, we have got the Basilo, and this creature can actually make oil in its inventory, which is actually a pretty useful thing. And you know, you might just use this thing as a caving creature, but it is also a pretty good creature for exploring just the general ocean biome, which is actually quite an integral part of the game in some ways, as obviously it's ocean caving, but also for a lot of resources you need to explore, you know, get loads of oil and silica pearls and black pearls and all of that. And I know they do have a depth limit, but still that doesn't really hinder them, and again they are immune to jellyfish and electric eels. I say it a lot on the channel, and that is something huge about these creatures. And they also do have an X variant, so there's an even better version of these creatures out there, and they can also make little rainbows as well when they jump out of the water, which is actually quite cute. I know it doesn't really affect their abilities and their uses, but you know, just a nice cool feature which might brighten up your day. Next up, we have got the Theory, and this creature has to be here as it is just so good at gathering all kinds of resources, which obviously makes it a very versatile creature in all kinds of anything really, and especially that fiber gathering, as fiber is one of the most essential resources in the game, and you'll pretty much struggle to find a better creature than a Theory which can actually gather fiber. And obviously you can use a sickle, or you can use a moss chop, so that's another great creature for you to use for this. The Theory just does it better, and it's pretty easy and accessible to tame. You just have to be level 69.
Nice.
That joke gets me every single time, but you know, it's actually pretty hard to find a really decent fiber gatherer, and this is a really decent fiber gatherer, but obviously it can gather all kinds of berries, wood, thatch, and all of that. And it's also pretty decent for the dragon boss fight because it's a herbivore, so it doesn't get affected by the dragon's fire attack, which is particularly lethal to carnivores and not very friendly to them whatsoever. So you know, that's where the benefit of this comes in. But sadly, you can't just use meat to heal them. You have to use something like sweet vegetable cake, and that is frankly quite expensive, so that is a downside. But apart from that, they really are great creatures. In at number 7, we have got the Baryonyx, and this creature is just so good at caving, but it is also great at several other things as well. But the caving just make it inherently versatile in itself, because being able to do caves and all kinds of caves and travel around many situations in caves is inherently versatile. And obviously it's a really great underwater mount as well, so that is again another really great use for this creature. And they do obviously have that spin attack, so they can stun creatures up to the size of a megalodon, which does play huge benefit in their ability. And if you do have one of those things, I definitely recommend you getting one of these things into the water, not just using it predominantly as a land creature, although you probably will predominantly use it as a land creature. Get it in the water and you get its feet wet and actually use it in the water, and you'll probably find that you really like this creature in that environment as well. Yeah, maybe it doesn't have the greatest amount of speed like some of the newer creatures out there, but considering it spawns on the island, you really can't go wrong with this creature. So that is why I put the Barry in at the number 7 spot, and you can see there that Megalodon is just completely frozen, so if you're in a pinch and you need to get out of a sticky situation, you can always do it with the Barry. Next up, we have got the Rhinoganatha. Personally, I don't really like this creature because I find it's a little bit too overpowering in what it can do, but I know loads of you out there really like this creature, and I'm not going to diss it for its versatility, even though it's not a favourite of mine, so I am going to put it on this list, although you might not quite agree with my next choice, which is my preferred option, and I will say it, albeit this is the kind of better creature in my opinion. It's just I don't enjoy using it, which is why I put it lower on the list, but still, this creature is full of very exciting opportunities. This thing can pick up creatures up to the size of a Rex, and can pick up Parasaurs, pick up all kinds of really big creatures, which is inherently a really great use in its own thing. Cryos do exist though, not on ASA at the moment, so it's the only way of really getting those big creatures around, but on normal arc, you can make do with cryos, and you'll definitely have loads of them by the time you get the saddle for this thing, or even attempt to tame one, because it is quite a difficult, lengthy process. Pretty much just a rip-off of the Reaper Tame, but you know, it is the same game publishers and the same game makers, so you can't really call it a rip-off, let's say, because I just said that earlier. You kind of maybe call it a rehashing. It's a little bit different, of course, because the way you get 100% effectiveness is with all of those resources which are just on the screen there, and if you feel like it's too unnecessary to read all of those, then it's probably too unnecessary to get all of those to actually get 100% effectiveness. And you're not bringing this thing to a boss fight. Don't really think that is very useful or worth your time. I just recommend saving the highest level when you can, and you don't need that 100% effectiveness. It's fine. You can just wait it out and you'll be good. But if you really are a perfectionist, obviously I'm not going to stop you from doing that. Also, these creatures are really great at raiding bases. Like, they deal a heck of a lot of damage. They're really quick flyers, they have a lot of carry weight, so you can transport a lot of metal around with them, and they are just inherently really big, beefy creatures, but not as big as maybe you would expect. Obviously, these things don't have a platform saddle like the Quetzal, so that still does have a slight gain over this thing, but it is a really versatile creature, although personally I don't really like it and kind of what it is, the creature. I think it's too overpowering. I'll still admit it's a very versatile creature. Now, in at number 5, we've got the Argy, and this creature just had to be here for me above the Rhinoganatha because I think it's a superior creature. It fits into the game more, and I really like its regen ability, the fact that its saddle acts as portable smithy, and it really seems to fit into the game, and it's a pretty easy tame as well. Not saying that the Rhinoganatha tame being really difficult like devalues it as a creature. No, it's a much higher level, so you would expect a harder tame method, but still I think again that does kind of make the RG a lot more accessible, albeit yes, the RG can't pick up anything like Rexes and all of that. I think that is personally a little bit stupid. I should really stop ranting on about the Rhinoganatha, because I know those of you out there really like it, so I'm going to stop that and I'm just going to talk about the RG, because I don't really think I should be dissing your opinions, although I should express mine. I think I've done it enough, haven't I? Either way, the RG can pick up a wealth of creatures. Obviously it does have that regen buff when it kills a dead thing. Well, it's alive and then it kills it, and then it's dead, and then it eats the dead thing, and then it gets the regen buff. And then it has obviously a portable smithy as its saddle, which is useful because this thing's really, it's got really great weight stats, so you can get around really quickly and easily just in the general area, and then from that you can take loads of metal to and fro wherever you're going, and yeah, that does play a huge benefit in your advantage. So the RG at number 5. Next up, we have got the Shadowmane, and this is just one of those creatures where it's so densely packed with abilities, it kind of has to make the list, or this list just really isn't right. The Shadowmane has the hydration buff. The Shadowmane can really jump to insane heights that no flyer is safe, and also on top of that it does have the pack buff and go invisible, and it's a really great swimmer. It's just really mobile. Again, can jump extremely high into the air. It can also charge up its damage as well, doing even more. It's just such a great boss creature, and just great for general travel, mobility, general combat, PvP scenarios, PvE scenarios, you name it, this thing is really good for it. The only real downside is the lack of armor from a saddle, but they have natural armor, so I guess that kind of accounts for it. It's not quite as bad as a Wyvern, where they just have absolutely nothing at all. And as you can see there, it's so good underwater, and actually quite a lot of people demote it for that and they just use it for combat, but it's a pretty good underwater caving creature too, and somewhat of a baryonyx replacement, although I tend to prefer the baryonyx just a little bit for those scenarios. At number 3, we have got the Desmodus Draculae, and this thing is just, it's one of those creatures where it's, maybe it doesn't have the most amount of abilities, let's say. Obviously it does have the gliding ability and it can farm blood bags, but it has really unique abilities that makes it so versatile, and obviously that Sanguine Elixir allows for creatures to be tamed so easily, as 30% of it is done right there with just a click of a button, and the blood bag farming is invaluable really, because the blood bags were just such a pain to get before this creature came out. Obviously it's tamed with blood bag, so you still need to do that quite lengthy process to get your first one, but just get a really low level one for your first one, get the lowest you can, and then use that to farm loads of blood bags, and then get the highest level that you can. That's my recommended strat anyway. For the Desmodus, these things can also go invisible at night time as well, but stupidly I was in the Wastelands biome and it never goes nighttime there, and you can't really change that, so that's good for me choosing the perfect biome for this creature. In number 2, we've got the Bloodstalker, and this creature, I feel like people diss it for what I really use it for, and maybe some people will think, well, the Shadowman and Desmodus are more versatile, this is just a travel mount, and you can't really use it for bosses and all of that, and albeit, yes you can't, but it is a really exceptional underwater mount, which is why I put it here, and it's actually my favourite underwater mount, with no questions whatsoever. Sorry about the yawning there, it's quite late in the evening as I'm recording this, but yeah, these things are my absolute favourite underwater creatures, no questions asked. They're so quick, they're so easy to take in the water, they can skim over the top of the water, which the Shadowman can't do. I know the Maywing can, but the Maywing's not on this list because it's only really great for travelling, and yes, that thing with its breeding abilities essentially acting as a portable feeding trough, and it can carry babies around the place. Yeah, it's useful for that and versatile for that, but personally I think all the creatures on this list do excel a little bit further than that. That's just kind of maybe genuinely what you would expect, just 2 abilities at a minimum. But yeah, this creature, you can gather loads of hexagons with it on Gen 1. I know that point's probably going to come back to bite me actually with the Maywing when you look at some of these other creatures on the list, but I just don't really think the Maywings should be on the list, but I guess it got an honourable mention spot here, you could say. But either way, these things are capable of getting loads of hexagons on Gen 1. They're really fast travelling creatures, of course. They're really great underwater, really quick. Obviously you take them with blood bags, so easy to get with the Desmodus, you might as well just do that and then tame yourself a really high level Bloodstalker, because it will be saving you the most time, unless you're just using creatures on Gen 1 or Gen 2, whatever map you're taming this thing on, if you want to go the more authentic route. And finally, in at number 1, we have got the Deinonychus, and this creature can deal bleed damage to bosses, which inherently makes it really versatile for every boss, apart from the bosses on Extinction, of course, because of that bleed ability. It's just so useful for getting all of that done, and its abilities are quite versatile as well. It's a really great travel mount. This thing does take no full damage whatsoever, which is a pretty rare occurrence on any kind of dinosaur, so it's nice to see. And the fact that it can latch onto creatures and just rip them to shreds with that bleed ability truly is a sight to be seen, and again, to my knowledge, no other creature can do this, and no one has seemed to have questioned me on it over the however long I've been doing top 10s, months and months now. It's coming up to maybe a year at this point. I don't know. No one has questioned me on this, so I'm pretty sure, I'm perfectly confident that it is true. Let's say 99%. These things also do have a pack buff as well, which again is going to boost them in those boss scenarios, and they have a heck of a lot of mobility on top of just them not being able to take full damage, because, would you rather have the small Titanosaur that can get around everywhere, or the big Titanosaur that just can't take full damage? You're probably going to go for the smaller agile one, because I don't know why I use a Titanosaur there, but either way, yeah, this thing could parkour up walls. That's actually quite useful. Maybe not as elegant as a solution as the Thyla, because those things can just kind of walk up them, run up them as you wish, but it does the same thing. It just in some ways is a little bit more janky, but you get used to it, and actually after a while, it kind of ends up being a little bit better.
The top 10 at best art travel mounts. In at number 10, I've decided to put the Rock Drake, as I find this is actually quite an effective creature for travel if you utilize it on the right maps. Yes, it doesn't fit into every situation where you may want this thing, but to be honest, if you get one and you use it for travel, especially on Aberration, it's like your only choice really on that map without any kind of transfers of things like Bloodstalkers and Maywings and all of that. It is really going to do a lot of good service on that map, and it really does do you some good service on some other maps as well, like Gen 1 2 if you want to bring it over, and especially maps with a lot of things just like big objects everywhere for this creature to hold on to, because it's not particularly great with loads of flat terrain. I wouldn't bring it on the island of course, but still you can get quite a lot of leeway out of this creature even in some flatter environments. I'm using it in one here and I still did get across this place pretty quickly while also recording the B-roll, so it went pretty smoothly in my opinion, and it is definitely a very nice, fast, reasonably great travel mount. There's also got a load of great attacking abilities as well, which just help it along the way. Next up on the list, I've decided to put the Pteranodon, as I really do like this as a general flyer. I think it has a lot going for it, especially considering the level that you actually unlock this thing. It's sort of insane what you can get out of this creature. It's a little bit absurd, to be honest, the level on which this creature is actually unlocked, as you would expect it to be unlocked way later into everything. But honestly, for level 38 saddle, this is one of the best flyers, or just travel mounts in general, that you can get, and I think nothing really else can compete with it, unless you're obviously on Gen 1 and Aberration, where you simply can't use Pteranodons. But you know, we're going to exclude those for the time being, as the majority of maps do allow flyers, and for all of those, which is obviously most of them, you're going to have a very good time with this mount. They're quick and easy to tame. You can simply do it with a bowler. You'll have no issues whatsoever, at least I haven't. The only real difficulty is getting that saddle, as you know, that chitin and keratin can be a little bit of a nuisance to get sometimes, but apart from that, it's totally fine. Continuing on the list, I've decided to put the Crystal Wyvern, as I find this is an effective mount just generally for all of that flying. Yes, you can use normal wyverns as well, but I just prefer the Crystal Wyvern. It's not necessarily that they're better in terms of a travel perspective, but I do vastly prefer the taming of these creatures. It's much easier. You only need to be level 60, which can be simply done with a note run, and then you knock out one of these things to get some primal crystal, and then passive tame one. My favourite is the Blood Crystal Wyvern. Comment down what your favourite is, as I definitely like to know, because you know, we all have a favourite wyvern, I think, at the end of the day, unless you've never used them before, especially in the Crystal Wyverns, I find, because their abilities are just so cool. The Ember Crystal Wyvern is one which is quite highly rated too. It has the same speed, mobility and rubbish turning circle as a normal wyvern, but they are really effective travel mounts, being like some of the fastest flyers in the game. I'm not including gliding abilities into that factor, just straight flying. The wyverns are some of the fastest out there, so they really do deserve this spot in my opinion, as I feel like, you know, they can be used quite effectively for a lot of travel scenarios. Coming up in the number 7 spot is the Snow Owl. This is the first glider, quote unquote, apart from the Rock Drake that we've had on the list, and this is one where I find it is a really effective traveller. It is a basic knockout tame, and you'll have no issues with that whatsoever. You simply need to head over to the snow biome on Extinction, and I think they spawn on Fjorda as well, so if you don't have Extinction, hop over to there, and I think you'll find them on that map. They obviously have that sort of dive bomb ability like the Griffin. The Griffin isn't on this list, but I'll give it a brief honorable mention. You could slot it in the same spot as the Snow Owl. They are quite similar when it comes to traveling abilities. It's just the Snow Owl is my preferred creature. I find them a little bit easier to tame, and I like some of their other abilities along with it, but obviously they're very quick flyers because of that dive bomb ability. Also feel it's a little bit more fluid than the one that the Griffin's got. That's probably merely a placebo, but we'll go with it. They also do have a kind of heat-seeking UV ability sort of thing, where you can go around and scout out all kinds of just organisms that give off heat. That can be used in whatever scenario you may need to apply it to. It sort of acts as night vision as well in some cases. Then obviously they can heal up creatures. You just need to level up their stamina more if you want to heal those creatures up for longer. If you're wondering why you can't heal creatures up for longer, it's because you need more stamina, so get that stamina cranking, and then you can heal some creatures for serious lengths of time and really get them healed up. It's great if you're just taming something and then its health is really low, like you've been training it for ages. You can simply heal it with one of these things and it's back up to scratch. The Daedon can't do that because it can only heal up your own creatures. And obviously snow owl pellets are going to be extremely useful if you're feeling scratches. You can get some insane loot. Next up, I've decided to put the Astrodelphis, as I find this is a really effective speed mount. If you want to get somewhere really quickly, the Astrodelphis or the Trichognathus, I'm kind of going to tag team them together because they are quite similar as creatures. Then you're going to want one of these two. The Astrodelphis is just my favourite though, so that's why I'm putting it here instead. They can dash across the map with insane speed, and that isn't even accounting for obviously any speed leveling that you may do, because you can't on these things like you can't on all flyers unless you enable it, but you can get some insane speed on these things totally like on official settings, and that is absurd. The only reason why you go for a Tropio, in my opinion, over the Astrodelphis is the taming method is slightly less expensive. The maps that it spawns on tend to be better, and obviously the saddle was unlocked at a way lower level. But apart from that, the Astrodelphis really does take the crown, in my opinion, for just being such a great travel mount. It can travel with such great speed and agility. It really is an effective mount for all of that. It's just like a dog fighter, but in Ark, essentially. In at number 5, I've got to put the Rhinognatha. This is obviously a very recent addition to Ark, but it really has influenced a lot of great traveling, at least for me, and especially because you can pick up things like Diplos and Rexes and Parasauritheriums. It's absurd what this creature can really do. It's sort of insane, really. It's like, honestly, mind-boggling from a person like me who's been playing Ark for absolutely ages. It's crazy how the game really progresses. I'm definitely here for it, even though I wasn't really when this creature first came out. It's obviously quite a rare one. You find it on the island, in the Lost Island. It's very accessible to all you players out there because obviously it spawns on just the main map of the game. And sadly, it's the swamp biome, makes the swamp biome even more dangerous. But when it comes to speed and agility, the Rhinognatha really just does have it. It can go with so much give, it's insane, really. You can fly for tremendous distances without really using up any stamina, and their weight is great. You can carry a lot with you, and you can travel with great speed too, which is something which sort of matters at the end of the day. So let's just continue on the list, shall we? Next up, I'm putting the Desmodus. This creature is truly an effective mount. It is a great glider, and it really has done a lot for me in terms of travel. It has the Sanguine Elixir as well, which is an absolute cheat for tames. I started a bit done like that with a click of a button. You'll have no issues whatsoever, or seemingly no issues whatsoever with the taming. You know, you never know what's going to happen. You could just get something like one of those ants just tear your tame to bits and ruin all of its effectiveness. That's annoying. Has that happened to you before? Comment that down below because I want to know. Again, it's got the same gliding ability as the Griffin and the Snow Owl. It really is just such a nice thing for a flyer to have, and this really does utilize it very effectively. I like how it uses the gliding ability. It feels very smooth, even smoother than the Snow Owl's one, and I do prefer it as a travel mount. They're also only spawn on Fjorda, like I think the Snow Owl, again, it does spawn on Fjorda too, but if you are on that map, I would rather go for this creature than the Snow Owl. It's just more useful in terms of all of its other abilities that for me as a PvE player, and I just prefer its general agility. In at number 3, I've decided to put the RG because this has been here for absolutely ages, and it is a go-to for me. Yes, while maybe not the fastest and most agile mount out there, I have done most of my traveling in Ark with simply this creature and this creature alone. I really do love it. Yes, nostalgia does play into it, but considering it spawns on the island and it is just so effective for metal gathering and more transportation, actually. The Dodic and the Yankees will be doing that, and it can pick those up too. You can also pick up berries, so if ever I was going to a cave, I could just pick a berry of this thing. This is pre-cryopod days, if you are wondering. Now I usually just would cryo up my berry, or soul traps really, because I use that mod instead. Yes, I use mods because I love them. The game is definitely better with them, at least from my perspective. They also can travel very long distances, considering their stamina is great. Their weight is also up to quite a high standard, and I really do like that. And obviously with the weight reduction, it's 50% on things like metal, crystal, and obsidian, which is why they're just such great metal haulers. They also have a portable smithy as a saddle, so you can do anything you do in the smithy in the LG saddle. So if you want to repair your armor after a cave run, let's say, you can, because those pesky autoclers at some point probably are going to get it, and that's something which you really don't want to happen. They also have a nice neat regen buff too, and I think that really does play into the essence of these creatures just being so versatile but also great travel mounts. In number 2, I've got to put the Bloodstalker, because for any underwater travel this is my go-to and I love it to absolute bits. It is actually insane how much I've been using the Bloodstalker as of late, but also just for general travel on the land as well. It is really effective. You're essentially a living Spider-Man. Its damage is also not to be underestimated. Yes, you're not going to be fighting any bosses with this thing, but you still can kill quite a fair few amount of creatures. They can obviously skate along the top of the water, and you can see all of the aggros of the creatures around you. So if a quick escape is needed, you can always go to the top of the water and skate away at lightning speeds, while also being able to see what creatures are actually aggroed onto you. This helps in a very low visibility environment like the ocean biome. I find that just to be really effective, and it just helps me in a way. Yes, I have the awesome Spyglass mod as well, but I don't need to really press anything for this to happen. It's just instant, and I could leave my awesome Spyglass on all the time, but frankly I wouldn't really want to do that. I only use it when I'm taming things. But obviously then when you hop out of the water, you've still got yourself an absolutely insane travel mount, and then you can be that real Spider-Man energy with you just slinging across the whole map. It's an insane creature for all things travel, and that is basically all I use it for, especially underwater travel. It's my all-time favorite underwater mount, and there is really no competition for this for me. That is my opinion. Let's get into number 1 spot, shall we? And in number 1, I've decided to put the Maywing, as I really do love this creature as a travel mount, and it is unbeaten ever since its release. This has been my go-to travel mount for everything apart from underwater travel. Although this is actually still a very decent underwater mount, and it can skate along the top of the water like the Bloodstalker 2. The Bloodstalker simply does a better job in that regard, but if I quickly need to dip in for something, the Maywing will definitely do the job with absolute ease. The saddle is unlocked at level 18, which is insanely early, so you can be getting these things basically as soon as possible. I think they spawn on Fjorda as well, but I usually go to Gen 2 to tame those things because I have the DLC and I just know they're there. Never tame one on Fjorda, but I think I've heard at some point that they have been on the map. I really am extremely unknowledgeable with Fjorda. Actually, I should probably look up all the creatures that are on that map and then converse with you in future top 10 videos. Either way, these things act as a portable feeding trough too, which is just absurd. It's a really nice ability for them to have. The animation is disturbing, but you know, we'll stick with it. And they can gather berries too, but the main reason why they're such good gliders, because you might say, well, they're just the same as the rock drake really, but you can really get a lot more agility out of these things than the rock drake, and you don't need very, you don't need a big difference in terrain elevation to get these things to actually fly far. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. I really hope that you all did enjoy, as I definitely did enjoy making this one. As always, comment down below what is the best Ark travel mount for you, and if you didn't agree with this list, then make sure to put your 10 down below, and I will see you all later.